The Cursed Antique Box, a true horror story from London. A chilling tale of two sisters who discovered a haunted box in a mysterious London antique shop. What they found inside changed their lives forever. August heat blanketed London in an unexpected wave. Sisters Jessica and Alison, who had come from Boston, sought refuge from the heat in narrow passages between Victorian buildings, where shadows promised saving coolness. They had come here for a week, their first joint vacation in 5 years. Jessica worked as an architect in New York. Alison taught literature in Chicago. Life had separated them into different cities, but the sisters remained close. Look, Alison stopped by a nondescript door in a narrow passage between old houses. A faded sign read, "Antiquities." An antique shop. Should we go in? Jessica wrinkled her nose skeptically, but the heat won out. They pushed the door, and a bell above the entrance rang out with an alarming, rattling sound. Inside reigned semi-darkness and the smell of old wood mixed with something sweetish, either incense or rotting fabric. The shop resembled a cave filled with the chaos of centuries, cracked paintings, porcelain figurines with broken noses, stacks of yellowed books, candelabras covered with wax from candles that had burned here decades ago. "Welcome," croaked a voice from the depths of the shop. The owner emerged from the shadow, a hunched old man in a rumpled vest, with gray hair slicked back. His eyes seemed too light, almost transparent. The sisters nodded and immersed themselves in studying the shelves. Jessica examined old drafting instruments. Alison leafed through a tattered volume of English poetry. And then she saw it. The box stood on the highest shelf, in a corner where dust lay especially thick. But the box itself was strangely clean. Black wood inlaid with mother of pearl in strange, flowing patterns, either waves or tongues of flame. The size of a shoebox, with an elegant bronze clasp in the form of a sleeping woman, his head. "Jessica," Alison called. "Look at this." She didn't. You know why she called her sister? The box simply beckoned. As if quietly whispering her name, Jessica approached and froze. "Beautiful," she murmured without taking her eyes away. Both sisters looked at the box, and it seemed the shop became quieter. Even the street noise outside the window seemed to recede. "How much does it cost?" asked Alison without turning to the owner. A long pause. Then the old man said, £50. Laughably cheap for such a thing. Jessica felt a prick of anxiety, but Alison was already reaching into her bag for her wallet. I'll take it." The old man slowly took the box down from the shelf. His hands trembled slightly. "Listen," he said quietly, extending the purchase. "Dawn, to open it at night." "Never. Only in daylight." The sisters exchanged glances. Alison laughed. "Does that come with the price?" A mystical warning. The old man didn't. He smiled. His transparent eyes looked at Alison with something like pity. "I am serious. In daylight, everything will be fine. But at night, he didn't." He finished. Jessica wanted to ask why, but Alison had already taken the box, put the money on the counter, and headed for the exit. The hotel where the sisters stayed was cozy, a room with 2 beds, a window overlooking red-tiled roofs, and a tiny bathroom. Alison placed the box on the table between the beds and was about to open it, but Jessica stopped her. "Let's do it tomorrow." "I'm dead tired." Alison shrugged and agreed. They had dinner at a restaurant across the street, drank a glass of wine each, talked for a long time about the past, about their parents, about how quickly time flies. They returned to the room closer to midnight. Jessica fell asleep almost instantly. Alison tossed and turned for a long time, staring at the ceiling. Moonlight penetrated through the thin curtains, drawing bizarre shadows on the walls. Around 1 in the morning, Alison opened her eyes. She didn't. It woke her. The silence was absolute. Even the street outside the window was silent. And then she heard it. A whisper, quiet, barely discernible, as if someone very, very close was pronouncing words in an unfamiliar language. Alison turned her head. The box stood on the table. In the moonlight, the mother of pearl patterns on its lid seemed to glow from within, slowly swaying like living things. And the bronze woman, his head on the clasp. Alison swallowed. The head was no longer sleeping. Its eyelids were half open. "Jessica," Alison whispered. Her sister didn't react. She lay motionless, breathing evenly and deeply. The whisper grew louder. Now Alison could distinguish the intonation. Tender, alluring, almost loving. The box was calling her, promising something. Alison got up from the bed. Her legs moved on their own. She approached the table, reached out her hand to the clasp. Her fingers touched the cold metal, and at that moment Jessica's hand grabbed her wrist. "Don, Jessica hissed. Her eyes were wide open, full of horror. "You heard what the old man said?" Alison blinked as if waking up. The whisper broke off. She pulled her hand back, and the sisters silently returned to their beds. They didn't say another word that night, but neither of them slept until dawn. In the morning, birds sang outside the window, and the box looked completely ordinary. The mother of pearl gleamed dully. The bronze head slept, eyelids tightly closed. "Was it a dream?" asked Alison at breakfast. "No," answered Jessica. They returned to the room with a firm intention to figure it out. In daylight, the fear seemed foolish. Alison opened the box. The clasp yielded easily with a quiet click. Inside lay a layer of burgundy velvet and nothing. The box was empty. Only on the bottom of the velvet was visible a burned spot, as if someone had pressed a red-hot coin there. "What a disappointment," Alison muttered, but Jessica frowned. She carefully touched the velvet. The material was icy despite the warm air in the room. And the burned spot. "It's not a spot," she whispered. "It is a shadow." Alison looked closer. Jessica was right. The shadow was moving, slowly, almost imperceptibly, spreading across the velvet, growing larger. The sisters slammed the lid shut. "We need to return it," said Jessica. Alison nodded. They rushed to the antique shop half an hour later. The door was locked. A sign hung in the window. "Closed. Probably a day off," suggested Alison. They stood at the door for 20 minutes, peering through dirty windows. Darkness reigned inside. The owner was nowhere to be seen. I'll come back tomorrow," Jessica decided. On the way back, they stopped at a cafe. Alison took out her phone and began Googling information about mystical boxes, cursed objects, English folklore. Jessica was silent, looking out at the street. "Alison," she said quietly, "am I imagining it, or are we being followed?" Alison raised her head. Outside the cafe window, on the opposite side of the street, stood a woman in a dark cloak. A wide-brimmed hat hid her face. She wasn't moving, just standing and looking in their direction. "Coincidence," Alison muttered, but the feeling of discomfort grew. They finished their coffee and left. The woman had disappeared, but that night she came to them. The second night began the same way, with a whisper, but now it sounded more distinct. Alison could make out words. They were in English, old, archaic. "Open me. Set me free. Open me. Free me." Alison clutched her pillow. Jessica wasn't sleeping either. She could hear her sister tossing and turning. And then came a knock at the door. 3 slow knocks. Silence. 3 more. The sisters froze. It was 3 in the morning. Jessica slid off the bed, crawled to the door, and looked through the peephole. There was no one on the landing. The knocking repeated, but now it wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from the box. The lid shuddered with each blow. The bronze head on the clasp opened its eyes, completely. Empty eye sockets stared straight at the sisters. "Let's throw it out the window," Alison croaked. Jessica nodded. She grabbed the box, rushed to the window, flung it open, and saw a face. A woman in a dark cloak hung outside the window, clinging to the ledge. Her face was white as chalk, eyes black voids. Her mouth opened, revealing teeth that were too long, too sharp. Mine. Jessica dropped the box. It fell to the floor with a dull thud. The woman outside the window vanished. Didn't he jump back? Didn't he fall? Simply dissolved into the air. The sisters stood embracing each other, trembling. The box lay open on the floor. Inside the velvet there was no longer a shadow. Now there lay a lock of dark hair. They didn't sleep until dawn. When the first rays of sun penetrated the room, both felt insane relief. The box looked ordinary again. The lock of hair had disappeared. We're going to the police," said Jessica. "And what will we say? That we're being haunted by a ghost living in an antique box?" Alison objected wearily. They were silent. Then Jessica said, "We need to learn the history of this thing. There must be a reason." They spent the entire day at the British Library, leafing through archives, old newspapers, books on London history. And by evening, Alison found an article. A murder occurred in the East End district. A young woman named Catherine was strangled by her own fiancé, who accused her of infidelity. Her body was hidden in a wooden box, which was then sold to an antique dealer. The article broke off, but at the end was a handwritten note. The box was never found. They say it still wanders through London's shops, waiting for someone to open it at night and release Catherine's spirit. Alison slammed the book shut. "We need a priest," she whispered. To their surprise, the priest at the local church took their story seriously. Father William, an elderly clergyman with a kind face, agreed to help. "There are more such things in London than you think," he said. "The city is ancient, and not all souls have found peace." They came to the hotel as a group of 3. Father William brought holy water, a crucifix, and an ancient prayer in Latin. They placed the box in the center of the room. "When I begin, don't interrupt me," the priest warned. No matter what happens, night fell. Father William began to pray. The reaction was instantaneous. The box shook. Black smoke poured from it, filling the room. The temperature dropped so sharply that the sisters could see their breath. A woman materialized right above the box, ghostly, distorted by rage and pain. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. Father William continued reading the prayer, sprinkling the box with holy water. The ghost thrashed about, tried to approach, but an invisible force pushed her back. And suddenly the expression on her face changed. Rage gave way to sorrow. She looked at the sisters, and Alison saw in her eyes not malice, but despair. "Help me," the ghost whispered. "Help me." Jessica stepped forward, despite Alison's cry. "What do you want?" she asked. The ghost extended her hand, pointing at the box, at the bottom where the velvet lay. "Bury me. Bury me." They dug up all the information about Catherine, found the place where her family's house once stood, got permission from the church. At a small cemetery outside the city, among old gravestones, they buried the box. Father William conducted a service. When the last prayer was said, the sisters felt relief. A weight they hadn't noticed suddenly disappeared. That night they both had the same dream. A woman in a white dress stood in a sunny clearing and smiled. She waved to them and dissolved into the light. In the morning, the sisters packed their things and left London. They never entered antique shops again, and the old antique dealer with transparent eyes closed his shop the day after their visit. They say he retired. They say he finally could. Some things are not worth selling. Some stories should remain unfinished. But this one was completed.